Hi, my name is Naheem, and in this reflection, I want to share the arguments and insights from our course that I found the most meaningful. We covered a wide range of religious and philosophical ideas, each offering a different way to understand suffering, moral responsibility, forgiveness, and the nature of the divine. Those aren't just academic questions, they touch some of the most deepest issues in life. Why do people suffer? How do we heal after conflict? Why do we make the choices we make? And if God exists, why isn't that fact obvious to everyone? In this video, I want to highlight the perspectives that resonated with me the most. Archbishop Desmond Tutu's truth and reconciliation approach, the Hindu principle of Ahimsa, C.S. Lewis's view in The Problem of Pain, Alvin Plantinga's free will defense, and the Jewish idea of divine hiddenness. Then I'll explain how these perspectives connect and why taken together they form the worldview that I personally find most compelling. I want to start with Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Truth and Reconciliation Committee in South Africa. Studying this was one of the most emotional and inspiring moments of the course. After decades of apartheid, decades of violence, humiliation, and division, the country was faced with an almost impossible question. How do we move forward? Do we punish everyone responsible? Do we ignore what happened and pretend the past is behind us? Or do we try something radically different? Tutu proposed something the world had rarely seen on such a massive scale: truth, telling as a national healing process. His belief was that nothing can be healed unless it is fully acknowledged. You cannot repair a wound you refuse to uncover. Victims were encouraged to speak openly about their experiences, and perpetrators, if they confessed the full truth, they could receive amnesty. This wasn't a perfect system, but what struck me was Tutu's faith in the moral power of truth. He believed that even the deepest crimes must be brought into the light before forgiveness becomes possible. What made this so compelling for me was how much it applies beyond South Africa. Every level of human conflict, family arguments, friendship breakdowns, community tensions, shares the same basic structure. Someone is hurt, someone is responsible, and trust is broken. Tutu's insight is that healing doesn't begin when we avoid the truth, it begins when we face it together. Forgiveness, in his view, isn't forgetting or minimizing harm, it's choosing to stop letting the past control the future, and that takes courage. I found this deeply meaningful because it challenges the way society often frames justice. We typically think of justice as punishment. Tutu reframes justice as the restoration of humanity. That is a powerful, even revolutionary idea. It made me realize how forgiveness and reconciliation are not signs of weakness, but signs of tremendous strength. The next idea that stood out to me was the Hindu principle of Ahimsa. At first glance, Ahimsa translates to non-violence, but as we explored it further, I realized it goes much deeper than simply avoiding physical harm. Ahimsa is about cultivating compassion at the deepest level, in your thoughts, your words, and your actions. It teaches that every harmful act begins as a harmful intention, and therefore, true nonviolence requires inner work. This insight challenged me personally because it shifts the focus of morality from the external world to the internal one. It doesn't matter if you never physically harm someone, if your heart is full of resentment, anger, or hatred, then the root of violence is still present within you. Ahimsa asks us to deal with that root. It's a discipline, a form of spiritual training. What I found beautiful about Ahimsa is that it gives moral agency to everyone, regardless of status or power. You don't need to be a political leader or religious figure to practice nonviolence. You practice it in the way you speak to someone who annoys you. You practice it in the patience you show under stress. You practice it when you choose understanding your judgment. In this sense, Ahimsa democratizes morality. Everyone is capable of contributing to a more peaceful world, starting with themselves. Another perspective that deeply shaped my thinking was C.S. Lewis's argument in The Problem of Pain. Lewis approaches suffering in a way that is both honest and hopeful. He doesn't deny how devastating pain can be. He doesn't romanticize suffering, but he argues that pain can play a meaningful role in shaping who we become. Pain forces us to confront ourselves, to examine our priorities, our motivations, and our character. Lewis's line that pain is God's megaphone to rouse the deaf world is provocative, but I understand what he means. In a moment of comfort, it's easy to drift through life without much reflection. Pain disrupts that. It pushes us to ask deeper questions. What do I really value? What am I supposed to learn from this? What needs to change in my life? Even outside of any religious interpretation, suffering often becomes a catalyst for transformation. Many people discover strength, gratitude, or clarity only after facing hardship. When I think about the times I've grown the most, academically, mentally, emotionally, they've all involved struggle. Pain sharpened my priorities. It revealed faults in me that never would have exposed. It revealed faults in me that comfort could never have exposed. Lewis helped me see that although suffering is terrible, it cannot open the door to growth that I would otherwise remain closed. The fourth idea that resonated with me was Alvin Plantinga's free will defense. Plantinga argues that if God wanted humans to have genuine moral freedom, then God had to allow for the possibility of evil. Without the ability to choose wrong our choices wouldn't be real. They'd be predetermined or forced. What I find compelling about this is how strongly it aligns with our everyday moral intuitions. We only admire someone's kindness because they could have chosen cruelty. We praise honesty because they could have been someone who lied. We respect courage because people are capable of choosing cowardice. Without freedom, morality collapses. Virtue is only meaningful when someone chooses it freely. Plantinga's argument also gives human dignity. It suggests that our decisions genuinely shape the world. We're not puppets. We're not pre-programmed. We are moral agents with the capacity to create good or evil. And that freedom, while dangerous, is what makes love, compassion, sacrifice, and moral growth possible. The last perspective that impacted me was the Jewish idea of divine hiddenness. Divine hiddenness asks a simple but profound question. If God exists, why isn't God more obvious? Why doesn't God reveal himself in clear, undeniable ways? The Jewish answer we studied is that God remains hidden to preserve human freedom and to encourage genuine seeking. A relationship based on overwhelming evidence wouldn't be a real relationship. It would be coercion. Hiddenness creates space for sincerity. It allows faith to be a choice rather than a forced conclusion. This idea really resonated with me because it reframes doubt in a healthy way. Doubt is not a failure. Doubt is part of the journey. It acknowledges that searching for God or for meaning is a process, not an instant revelation. It also mirrors real relationships. If someone forced themselves into every moment of your life, you don't call that love. You call it surveillance. Hiddenness makes space for authenticity. It respects human autonomy. So after looking at all these views, Tutu's reconciliation, Ahimsa's compassion, Lewis's interpretation of pain, Plantinga's free will, and divine hiddenness, what do I personally find the most compelling overall? For me, the most compelling, most meaningful worldview is actually a combination of three central ideas. The first being C.S. Lewis's belief that suffering can lead to growth. The second being Plantinga's insistence that freedom is essential for moral dignity. And the third being the Archbishop Tutu's conviction that healing requires truth and forgiveness. Together, these form a worldview that is realistic about human suffering, but also deeply hopeful. They accept that life includes pain, but they refuse to treat pain as meaningless. They affirm that humans have freedom, but they recognize that freedom carries responsibility. And they show that despite all the suffering and moral failures in the world, reconciliation and restoration are possible through truth, compassion, and courage. My justification for choosing the combined worldview is simple. It aligns with both lived experience, and moral intuition. It explains why suffering can shape us without glorifying it. It explains why free will matters, even though it puts tremendous responsibility on us. And it explains why forgiveness, although difficult, is one of the most powerful forces in human life. Ultimately, this course has shown me that meaning is not handed to us. Meaning is created. It's created through our choices, through the way we confront suffering, through the compassion we show others, and through our willingness to seek the truth even when it's painful. The perspective we studied gave me a richer understanding of why the world is the way it is, and how we can respond to its challenges with integrity, courage, and hope. Thank you for listening.